Hey, how are you guys doing?
Doing
Doing
great.
well. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of
Yeah, of
course.
course. Well, to start off, Ellie, and I've been kind of asking this question to our congressional candidates that we interview lately, because you're running as kind of a progressive Democrat, and it wasn't until pretty recently that we had some nominally leftist or progressive representatives in the House, and now we do have a significant handful, despite the fact that their numbers are often underplayed. We do have a decent, voting block of progressives in the Senate or in the Congress. Sorry, the squad and Pramila Jayapal, Mondaire Jones, etc. So I was just wondering if you could give a little bit of a gauge on their job performance. Like, what do you think about the progressives in Congress? Do you think that their strategical approach thus far has been effective? If not, how would you differ in your approach as a congressperson? And also just kind of getting at what you kind of see the role of a congressperson being, because a lot of people on the left really want these squad members, for example, to be activists. They want them to be in there shaking things up, calling out the leadership, trying to force them to take votes on certain issues that we hold dear here on the left. And I'm just wondering if people can expect that kind of congressperson out of you, or what you kind of think about when you consider what you would do in there.
Okay, yeah, so let's jump, right into the deep end with like 6 tough questions right off the bat. Good. So
it's a Vanguard.
I'll remember them all. In terms of the performance, I think here's the issue, right? So like we started getting some progressives in. It really started happening 2018. Barbara Lee was kind of out there all by herself for a while in the House, and we've gotten more in. And as we are able to get more and more people who are truly progressive in there, I think we're going to see more unified approach to getting things done. I know there's been a lot of controversy, and there was a lot of folks who were really unhappy about how things worked with having Nancy Pelosi being named the speaker and everything like that. And I don't know the ins and outs of what's going on. Katie Porter made a comment about we're going to get things done, right? I think that based on what I know about these representatives, they're doing the best that they can. Whether or not that's good enough, I don't know, right? We all want more and better from our representatives. But, to have someone who goes from being a middle school teacher or a homeless activist pastor to suddenly being in the House of Representatives and everything that represents, I think there's a huge learning curve there. And I also think that, unfortunately, the way Congress is currently established, where the longer you're in, the more power you have, which is, it should be based on merit, right? That the best people should get the positions of power. That's not the way it actually works right now. So I think that in some ways their hands may be tied. I think the simple answer is the more people we get in who are not taking any corporate PAC or dark money, like I'm not, and I know other people you've had on are not, the more people we get in, the less influence the people who are corporatists will have, and the more we'll be able to shift and really push things through. So you look at the stimulus package, right? Like that would never have happened, under the Trump administration, and I don't think we would have had as many good things in there if we hadn't had the progressives fighting for it. But having said that, if we had a lot more people who were not taking corporate money, I think we might have seen things like, the $15 minimum wage, or, 15 over 5 years, that's not really living wage. Maybe we would have seen an actual living wage, right? So it's a balancing act. I can't like detailed answer a what if, what would I do if I was there, because I'm not there.
Well, would you have voted for Speaker Pelosi, for example? It's kind of what I'm getting at.
She's not my favorite person, I gotta say. I think that my vote probably wouldn't have mattered, and I don't think I would have cast it. So it's interesting, right? So I'm new to politics, right? I've spent 33 years as an environmental worker, right? This is what I've done. I've done natural resources and climate change and endangered species, active invasive species, pollinators, birds, herps, whatever. So this is what I've been doing, right? For 30 years. And so now I'm stepping into this political realm. And the one thing that I've always been it's always been important to me is to have integrity, to do what's right. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. I've been in this race for a month, and I've already had 2 different people basically try to tell me to compromise my values and positions in order to achieve political gain, right? So I had one person who said, well, the incumbent has suddenly decided, so it's true, the incumbent in Virginia 11 has suddenly started signing on to all these progressive pieces of legislation that he's ignored for years. That's awesome. We got
Gerald
into the
Connolly, correct?
Jerry Connolly. We're pushing him. That's great. He's really, he's trying to make it look like he's doing a good thing. But signing resolutions and actually voting are 2 different things, but that's another conversation. And so I had someone say to me, now that Connolly says that he's for whatever it was at the time, you need to go to the left and you need to say that you're more than this. And I'm like, no, this is our position. And if he's decided that he wants to support that, fine. I'm not going to say something that's not the truth just to gain political advantage. And then I had another thing. Somebody wanted me to sign off on something, and I was like, it's not a big deal, just sign off. And I'm like, but I disagree with the wording. I really genuinely, I'm not comfortable with the way this is worded. And if you want to change the wording about it because I'm okay with the concept, and they're like, no, the words are important. And I'm like, if the words are important, then the words are important. But you know what? I can't do that. So which is a really long way of saying, I don't think I could have voted for Pelosi because I just don't support her. We all remember the fridge with the $20 ice cream, right? Like, really? People are starving and waiting in food lines, and you're showing off your slam pack freezer that's got like ice cream I've never even heard of before that I would love to try one day.
And you mentioned Katie Porter a second ago, and I was actually a little bit disappointed because Katie Porter was one of these progressives who was very vocal against the Republican Party and against corporate interests and CEOs and all that. She does an amazing job, but she refused to use her leverage when she had it. She refused to resist Pelosi, and then was sidelined by Pelosi. She lost her seat on the House panel overseeing financial sector. So basically, allowed herself to be slighted and cast to the side by the House leadership. Basically, you're giving her permission to do so by giving her vote. And that's the only reason why I ask, because I feel like there is a genuine concern among people that the genuine leftists, the people that are well-intentioned and don't take corporate PAC money like yourself, they're allowing themselves to be sidelined, and they're not properly using their leverage to get progressive wins like $15 an hour, which was not really fought on hard enough at all, in my opinion at least. So I guess that's just something I'll say about Katie Porter, who again is great, but I think could really be even more effective too had she not given up her leverage.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I thought a lot about that actually. And I don't know what happened. I don't know her personally, and I don't have firsthand knowledge of that situation. But you remember when AOC was told she couldn't support anybody going against incumbent Dem because that was just the way it was. I can't help but wonder if Pelosi was like, look, vote for me and don't worry, we're going to do your thing, and lied. No. Pelosi's a master like her or not, she's very good at her job, right? At being a politician, which basically means persuading people to her way of thought. And I just can't help but wonder if maybe she lied to Katie Porter. I don't know that. I'm just speculating because it was an odd move, right? It seemed out of character for how Katie Porter normally would be. But I don't know.
It strikes me as manipulation, and you're right that is a critical role of somebody and or a critical part of a role that Nancy Pelosi has in Washington. She's there to essentially manipulate the left and manipulate the progressives to undermine them and prevent them from accomplishing key parts of their goals that she's articulated that she stands against. I want to focus in a little bit more on Virginia 11 and talk about Gerry Connolly, who you mentioned a little bit earlier on in our discussion. I'm wondering if you could do a little bit of comparing and contrasting between yourself and Gerry Connolly, and also for people who are listening who might not be as familiar with his politics and how he's governed long term. I'm wondering if you could talk about maybe how he's changed and pivoted as a response to the threat that a progressive movement might bring to his position in power, and also why you feel like it's important to replace him.
Yeah, great. Lots of good questions in there. I'll try to do my best answering them all. So first, let me give you a little bit about the district. District 11 in Virginia is right outside of DC. It's in Northern Virginia, and it's most of Fairfax and large portions of Prince William County. It's a relatively overall affluent district with pockets of poverty. There's a lot of government contractors and a lot of federal employees. Connolly started, I think, almost straight out of graduate school, working on the Board of Supervisors in Fairfax County, and has spent an entire career working his way up to become the congressman here in this district. He was just elected to his 7th term. So he's in his 12th or 13th year. And he likes being in power. He is in it for his career. That's what he wants, right? That's he wants to spend his life in his career. His goal is to gain power, to gain chairmanships, and he likes that. And that's his thing. You asked about differences. He gets 90% of his funding from corporate PACs and mega donors, and like Virginia Dominion Power, Northrop Grumman, Amazon, whatever. He is in the top 10 for Congress people who takes money from the military industrial complex, and he has voted for every war that has come before Congress. He does not support universal health care. He supports an expanded ACA, even though 10% of the people in this district are completely, uninsured and even more underinsured. He does not support the child care for working families. He does not support, there was a bill introduced for ranked choice voting by Don Beyer, who's in the 8th district right next door. It's called the Fair Representation Act. He does not support ranked choice voting. Shocker. He does not support, he signed on to the Green New Deal resolution, but this is the thing, he signs on to a lot of these things, right? But Virginia has a Green New Deal Act, which actually implements Green New Deal activities, creates thousands of jobs. It's actually super good. And he's never even acknowledged it, let alone endorsed or supported it, because he's not interested in actually doing things like that. He just wants to appear. Like he was like, I'm all for HR 1. I support HR 1. And then he voted against Cori Bush's amendment to allow former prisoners to vote. So, there's a disconnect there, right? So I think the biggest difference is that what I say is really what I mean. I'm not in it as a career politician. I've had my career. I'm doing this because I just was overwhelmed by the hypocrisy and by, COVID brought everything to the surface. And I've told this story a couple of times. My son was the one who actually came to me and he's like, you got to run for Congress, Mom. And that started the conversation. And the thing that was the final driver, and I've talked about this, was watching the nightly news one night. And it was with the HEROES Act, which was last summer, where there was the first big COVID relief bill. And the reporter came on and said, Representative Connolly is holding up the HEROES Act for a 48-hour debate so that we can provide $3 billion to corporate, to military corporate interests, right? To corporate contractors who do, what's the word I'm looking for? Military contractors. Yeah. So, and that money was mostly for, some of it went to the employees, a lot of it went to pay for corporate headquarters and executive bonuses. And I'm like, people are starving, and I'm from this area. I've been in that federal workforce, right? Like I've been a contractor, I've done those things. Those people generally are not the ones about to lose their homes. They've got health benefits, they've got a job when it comes back. It's, they're not the ones who are hurting. And he's not representing the vast majority of people in this district. He's not supporting, working families who are trying to have like 2-3 jobs, who, he doesn't support the Schedules the Work Act so that you can have flexible schedules so you can take care of your kids or do whatever you need to do, and there's just a lot there. And he doesn't support universal pre-K, which I think is at the root of a lot of things. If you look at education, climate change, and healthcare, I think those are sort of the three underlying, E.G. Omoluo talks about the intersectional equality, right? I mean, the intersectionality of things, right? And so it's all interrelated, right? And if you're not supporting the basic tenets that underlie these things, you're not anything you say is just talk, because you're not actually going to address any of the systemic issues, like having a for-profit motive in what is really should be a common good, right? Healthcare, education, prisons, those are common goods. These are things that everybody in the country needs to benefit from. And if you have a profit motive in them, it skews everything, right? So I think those are the biggest differences. And there was one more part of your question. Why me? Why now? That's right. And I think I've answered that. So, and why me, frankly, is because no one's stepping up. And I do also want to say that Connolly was primaried in 2020 by Zainab Mohseni, who, it was just her and a few volunteers. She only raised $28,000 and she got nearly 25% of the vote. This district is ready for change. We contacted Zainab. We're like, are you running again? We're in. She wasn't, for personal reasons. She's got a lot going on. And we were like, you know what? That's when Kyle was like, Mom, you need to do this. You need to do this. So, if not me, who?
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah. And my question wasn't so much why you, was it just why there needed to be somebody, and you answered both of those questions quite perfectly. Thank you very much. I just had a quick follow up as it pertains to Virginia politics, and one of the things I wanted to ask you, especially as you're engaging with voters, is obviously there's a Democratic trifecta in the state of Virginia with a Democratic control in the House, the state Senate, and then obviously Ralph Northam in the governor. And I'm wondering if people seem to be more reluctant to notice the difference between or if that makes it harder to make the case as a progressive. They're like, oh, we already have Democrats, like that's not changing anything. Offering something new as a progressive Democrat who truly does distinguish themselves from somebody like Ralph Northam or a more centrist Democrat, but with the same party labeling. I'm wondering, does that muddy the waters for you, or do people seem to not be bothered by that?
That's an excellent question. It does muddy the waters. And there's a huge shift that's going on right now in Virginia, right? So our state house is super progressive and has passed a lot of really cool legislation recently. And it goes to the Senate, and you've got a lot of these corporate centrists. They've been in office for, 30, 40 years, however long it's been. And a lot of things have died there. We currently have a gubernatorial race that's ongoing. Our primary is in 3 months. And we have some super progressive people on the ballot, and probably too many, because I'm afraid they're going to split the votes. And then we've got this one centrist, Terry McAuliffe, who was previously governor and who's got $21 million in primarily corporate money. And, it's more of the same. And so, there's a lot of change happening right now in Virginia. And I think that there's this growing swell of people who get the difference between people who are, really progressive and really, I think, what Democrats used to be. And those who are like, well, I was a Democrat and I was progressive 30 years ago, and I know what I'm talking about. And they're not. They're basically Republicans now. They are. And they're like, no, we can't lose this district. I can't support you because, Jerry Connolly's in there and it's a plus 15 Democrat. That, for a Republican to win in this district, that would have to be a pretty amazing Republican. You know what I'm saying? And no one's declared. So it's really interesting that I get a lot more pushback from especially older Democrats who were active in the 60s and 70s. And I'm actually getting a lot more positive response from young people in general and from progressive Republicans and libertarians who get it. They think universal health. We have genuine disagreements about some of our policies, but they believe in universal health care. They believe in saving the planet.
Well, that's the maddening thing about the Biden presidency is he pretends to be a bipartisan. Meanwhile, there are a plethora of bipartisan issues. Universal health care is supported across the board. People do want environmental protections. People do want these basic human rights. And Biden over here is pretending to be a bipartisan actor, is really just catering to the corporate right-wing extremists.
Yeah, there's no profit in universal health care.
Yeah.
Nobody's making a buck on that. So, yeah.
Well, I did want to get your reaction to another debate, which is kind of raging. Well, it has been raging for a long time now. It's quite the hot button issue, quite controversial, and that's just the whole concept of state lockdowns. And you've talked about being a small business owner whose business essentially had to close, if I'm correct, thanks to COVID. And I'm wondering just what your opinion on this is, because there has been so much division on the necessity of lockdowns, and unfortunately, it has become an extremely partisan issue. Unfortunately, more often than not, however, it is people on the right wing that I see pointing out that the somewhat admittedly tyrannical nature of government, canceling people's livelihoods and then refusing to reimburse them. Obviously, lockdowns are necessary to prevent the spread of COVID-19. But what's not necessary is to leave people, destitute without a job, without their business or occupation. Do you think this is acceptable? And how do you think it should have been addressed or should be addressed going forward?
Yeah, I mean, clearly we're feeling the fallout of the wacky last administration where wearing a mask was a political issue. Just as an aside,
yeah.
I saw this really fun thing my daughter showed me, and it was like, wearing a mask is a choice. And underneath it, someone put, "Oh, now it's a choice?"
Yeah.
Like, that was kind of funny. But, the reality is where we are now, right? And I think that I actually disagree. I don't think lockdowns are necessary. Lockdowns, right? Everything shut. I don't think that's necessary. I think that so one size fits all never does.
Yeah.
Right? So what works in Manhattan, where maybe they need a lockdown, I don't know. There's a lot of people packed in really close. Yeah. Maybe doesn't work in Iowa, where there's a lot more room. People can get out. You can get out. You can be safe. We get out here where I am in the suburbs of DC. We're not densely packed in. And it's you double mask, you wash your hands, you wear glasses or a face mask, you try not to talk or sing or scream or whatever, and you can go about your daily work. I think people have said close the bars, open the schools, and I get that. However, I have a lot of friends who are school teachers, and even though they're vaccinated, the kids aren't vaccinated yet, right? Once we're vaccinated, and if people will simply just wear a mask. Once the virus has no host, it will die, right? The virus needs a host to live. That's just basic biology, epidemiology 101, right? So I feel like the whole situation has been mismanaged. I think we need to take a much more micro approach rather than this macro one size fits all. I think you take a micro approach. You have a mask mandate, maybe. Yes, because I think masks are still very needed right now because the virus is still here. Get the vaccines out, but allow communities to decide what's best for their community, and hopefully they don't have crazy people opening the entire state like in Texas.
Yeah, and I think you make an excellent point right there, because it seems like obviously because of Donald Trump, it immediately created like a bifurcation of this issue, right? We couldn't just have a common sense analysis of this as one country. It had to have a Democrat response and a Republican response. And I think that created a real dearth of actual conversation, there was no actual reasonable thinking about this, and the plan that you laid out right there, it seems like it borrows so reasonably, right? Like, it's considering the angles. Like, of course, yes, you should still wear a mask, cover your eyes because you can absorb COVID droplets through your eyes if you don't wear glasses. Wash your hands thoroughly, practice social distancing. We can do all of those things and still allow our society to function so that it doesn't collapse. Yes, we should institute new measures, social distancing at our works. We're going to have to adjust our lives, but we didn't have to just completely say we're going to close up shop and poor people be damned, rich people, everybody have a nice vacation. And it just seems so, it was just really refreshing to hear that analysis, because it just was completely absent.
So I want to add to that a little bit, because I didn't mention social distancing like 6 feet, right? I less now because I've just been busy, but I watch a lot of news, like a lot of different types of news, right? I watch I listen to NPR, and I watch PBS, and I watch Fox, and I watch everything. So I watch NHK News. And one morning, months ago, literally they were talking about, they'd done this little study in Tokyo, and Tokyo is incredibly densely populated, where they found that they could have people be on the metro packed in on the metro and be safe,
Really?
provided they were all double masked and wearing glasses and didn't speak. Because if nobody's speaking, the respiration drops aren't getting out.
Yeah, but that's common sense stuff that we just are refusing to have a conversation about.
Yeah.
Right. So South Korea, for example, fully open, right? I mean, Australia, fully open. It's easily done if people will just take the time to do what's needed in the short run.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, something else I wanted to ask you about was your previous job in the environmental field. You discussed how this position was actually essentially eliminated by the Trump administration. Can you talk about the assault on our environment and on regulations which are intended to protect it, as well as, endangered species and the likes?
Sure. Yeah. So, my last position before my job was eliminated was managing DoD's natural resources program. And for those who don't know, the Defense Department is responsible for managing about 25 million acres of land, and much of it is incredibly high quality habitat. And that's because so first of all, I'll give you a little bit of history. DoD they wanted to be able to have areas that replicated other areas around the world. So their bases are located so that they have every major habitat type in the country. And those bases now have some of the last remaining remnant habitats of those original because of development, right? Like the only undeveloped coastline between, I think it's, I hope I don't get this wrong. I think it's San Francisco and LA. No, that's too far. Whatever, LA and somewhere, is Camp Pendleton. I'm forgetting the other name of the city. That's the only undeveloped stretch of coastline is on a military installation. Everything, all the other beach habitat has been completely developed. Mm-hmm. So what you have is an agency that takes its responsibilities seriously, because DoD will do what it's told. DoD managers do what they're told, right? They are complying, and they're complying with the laws. Then you have the Trump administration come in and start undermining those laws, right? He doesn't eliminate any of them because that's hard. But for example, one of the first things that I had to do after he came in was I had to go to Interior and actually defend the department's right to continue to protect migratory birds, and because they got rid of what's called the incidental take requirement, which is like if you accidentally if you know you're going to take a bird incidental to another activity, you used to have to get a permit from the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they were like, no, because if you're driving down the road and you hit a bird, you're going to go to jail. Well, which is absurd, right? And so the Biden administration, by the way, has just put that back. They reinstated the incidental take provision. So that's like a super good step in the right direction. But so Trump did this, right? So it was like he undercut. He had this incredibly awesome, amazing, bright, talented lawyers who parsed these laws out and found ways to basically weaken all of the legislations, right? Clean air, clean water, particulate standards, everything, right? Endangered Species Act, migratory birds, didn't matter. Who cares, right? Because who cares if the planet's here in 20 years? Because, Donald Trump's not going to be here, so I only care about me, is the way he approached it.
I'm chasing the check now.
Right. So what happened is I was, the previous administration been very supportive of the environmental efforts that DoD was doing. And DoD is actually on the cutting edge of a lot of stuff like climate change. They've been doing that since the 90s. And because of, well, it doesn't matter. So they've been doing a lot of stuff. And
climate change is going to affect our war politics a lot. But anyway, yeah.
It's a global stability. It's the 3 C's, right? It's a climate, conflict, and corruption. Anyway, what happened was when the appointee came, when they finally put the appointee in for overseeing the Department of Environment, Energy Installations and Environment, I started getting pushback, right? Like all these things we were trying to do, revise policies, put out a new policy for, trying to consider land across geographical boundaries. All this stuff is like completely not interesting, I'm sure, to everybody who doesn't work in it. But the point is, started hitting all these barriers. And then I got called in for a meeting and I was like, well, what's this meeting about? And it was like, just come. And so I've got all my stacks, right? Like all these things I'm working on. I come with this pile of stuff and I'm like, okay, I don't know what we're talking about, but I'm ready. And she's like, yeah, we don't have sufficient funding to continue funding your position. I was like, the Department of Defense has insufficient funds
Yeah.
to cover my position.
Yeah, I was like, I can think of some ways that they could make it up.
So she was like, yes, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to renew your position. I was like, okay. And then 6 months later, they did actually rehire that position, but at a lower GS level, a lower level, so it would be reporting to somebody, and they changed the scope of the parameters and abilities of that position. So yeah, that was super fun.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing that is definitely true, and obviously, we're extremely critical of Joe Biden and the Democratic administration on this program, but I do think it is fairly undeniable the fact that when it comes to regulations, especially when it comes to environmental regulations, it really is a world of difference. Just recognizing the reality of these issues, and obviously, I don't think, for example, Biden's climate change plan goes far enough. But when it just comes to preserving, like you said, migratory birds or endangered species or stuff like that, am I a fool for wanting there to be endangered species kept alive? What I'm saying? Like there are things like that are certainly he's better. I don't think there's any denying that. So yeah, thanks for that insight. Certainly, I want to talk a little bit about your endorsements. You've been endorsed by Marianne Williamson. She's done so much good work bringing attention to great candidates such as yourself, and congratulations on that endorsement. You've also been endorsed by Blue America and a few other kind of local groups like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if you plan on seeking the endorsements of groups like Justice Democrats or Brand New Congress. While their merits have been slightly up for debate recently, certainly they have helped bolster other progressive candidates. Obviously AOC, for example, Cori Bush. So I'm just wondering what you're thinking in that respect, as far as building name recognition, building that network of volunteers. Where do you see yourself going?
So we did apply to Brand New Congress, and that's an ongoing discussion. For Justice Democrats, that the way their process works, somebody else has to nominate you. So if anybody wants to nominate me for Justice Dem,
the audience nominate
I'm all for it. Please do. It's a really lengthy application, but that would be an amazing endorsement that we would love to get.
Interesting. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. Unless you had anything else, Zach, to mention.
Just where can people go to support you and learn more about your campaign?
Thank you for asking. We've got a huge uphill battle, so they can go to Ally for Congress or follow me on at Ally, the number 4 Congress. And, if you've got a few extra dollars, 10, 20, 50, $1, no amount is too small, please do donate. If you can volunteer, we would love your help. If you can shout us out, retweet, follow us. We're really just trying to get the word out. Our biggest hurdle is that everyone in our district knows all about Jerry because he's been here since before most of the people were born around here. And nobody knows me yet because I'm new to politics. And so we really want to get the word out. Thank you for showing my website. We're working on expanding that, and we're going to actually launch a new website on April 7th. So
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and chat with us today. We wish you the best of luck, and we'd love to have you back on closer to the election time to get an update on your campaign.
Would love that. Thank you for the opportunity. You guys have a great night.
You too. Thanks so much, Ellie.